and welcome to Jaspersoft Tech Talk number 3, Jasper Reports Tips and Tricks. Today is December 18th, 2012. This will be our very last show of the year, so next shows will start back up in January. Today we have a special guest, Teodor Danciu, founder and architect of JasperReports. So he is the man with all the answers. No, but he's got a great presentation for us today. So before we get started, we're going to do a poll question, which will ask about your level of knowledge of Jaspersoft. This will help set the level of technical knowledge for future topics. So we'll put up the poll now and give you just a few minutes to vote. So we'll share the results of the poll after the show or maybe during one of the breaks. It looks like most people have now voted, and we still have a few people coming in. So if this is your first time to listen in on a Tech Talk, the way that this works is the presenter, today Teodor Danciu, will present his topic for about 30 to 40 minutes. After that, we'll go into question and answers from the audience. Now, if you guys could just send in your questions while we're doing the show. So if your question's about the presentation or the specific topic, we can actually answer it as we're going. And if you have questions about anything else in Jaspersoft, I've got a panel of experts here sitting in the Dublin office that can help answer those. So with that, we'll switch the presentation over to Teodor and carry us away. Teodor, thank you.
Thank you, Ernesto. Welcome everybody to today's talk. I tried to select 3 tips and tricks for today, and given the 30 to 40 minutes, I hope it will be enough to go through these. I put them here in chronological order, let's say, in terms of when they were introduced in our products, and they're also sorted by level of leverage of the JasperReports Library itself, and I will explain. The first tip and trick of the day, it's about how to get a hold of a field value which sits on the previous record in the data source when you create a report with JasperReports. There are many cases or many types of documents that require such a formula that combines values from the current record and from the previous records in the data source. So I will explain how to achieve that. This is an old trick of the JasperReports Library. The question came up on our forums from time to time, so I thought it's a good candidate for today's Tech Talk. The second one, it's about how to export reports created by JasperReports to other formats and then be able to further manipulate the data inside those documents, especially if it's about data-centric formats like Excel and CSV. And the last topic of the day, it's about a new feature in our products, which is the ability to cache the data of the report and reuse it in various ways, as we'll see. So let's move to the first topic, how to get a hold of a value that sits on the previous record in our data source while we iterate through the data source of the report, and how to create formulas that combine values which sit on different records in the data source. Knowing the nature of the JasperReports reporting engine, which is able to use any kind of data source and mix it with layout information from the report template and be able to produce any kind of document, no matter how complex it is. Well, given this nature of the engine which iterates through the data, basically the report record pointer in the data source moves from the first record to the last record in the data source. And at any time, we can, of course, work with field values from the current record, but how can you use the value of a field that is from the previous record? And I will move directly to iReport. Probably many of you, if we were already using our product and you created reports for JasperReports that you, I don't know, probably deploy in your application if you embed our library, or you deploy those reports in our JasperReports server product, you probably created them using the iReport designer. And this is what we see here on screen. I have the latest version of the iReport designer, and I'm going to open one of the sample reports that we ship with the source package of JasperReports Library. It's called the Jasper sample, and it's a fairly complex document that has grouping and performs various calculations and has a somewhat more complex layout because it has two columns that run side by side like columns in a newspaper. So it's a fairly complex report, and you can try it out if you download our source code. I'm going to first preview this report for you just to see what it displays. So I hit the preview button in iReport, and now I need to provide some parameters that this particular report requires, such as the title and a parameter for the query, the max order ID. And it's listing some order information. I deliver some product to various customers in different countries, so this is what I see in this report. When I said it runs on two columns side by side, it's, as you can see, the records run through the bottom of the page and then restart on the same page because this report has two columns. But let's go to this trick that I wanted to present to you today. The last column in my table is the freight. So basically what quantity of products I ship to a particular customer. That's the information I have in my report. And I see the freight as the value of the field called freight, which is in my data source. How would I be able to display in the same table the difference between the current record freight and the freight on the previous record? Well, let's make some place in the table for this field that is supposed to display the difference. So I will delete one of the fields here just to make more place. And I copy paste this field and I will modify its formula. Just moving it in place. All right. So right now I have two text fields displaying, both displaying freight. But let me create a variable that is supposed to be my difference between the current value of freight and the previous value of the field freight. So I will create some variables in my report. I do that using right-click in the outline view. I create a variable that I call freight. This is just to, let's say, hold the value of the freight field. The type of the variable is the same as the field, double, and it doesn't perform any calculation like sum or average or anything. And in its expression, I just point to my fright field, because I want to hold in this variable the value of the fright field. Then I calculate a new variable, and I will do that with copy-paste just so that we do it faster. I created a second variable, and I will call it, let's say, old fright. And I'm supposed to hold here the value of the fright field from the previous record. And I will point to the fright variable that I just created above. So I have for now two variables pointing to each other. And then let me create yet another variable, the one with the difference that I want to make. And I will call it fright difference, fright diff. For this one, same type, double, but in its formula, I will make the difference between the two variables that I just created above. And if you're not a Java developer, don't worry. We can write formulas using simplified expression language like Groovy, but in this particular case, the language associated with my report is Java, so I'll write a formula in Java for now. But Groovy is much simpler, so you'll probably use that when you create your reports. So I get the value of the fright, and I subtract the value of the old fright. Old fright. And I'm done. All right. And now, in the text field that I just created, I want to display the fright diff value. There we go. I think I'm done. I save the report, and let's preview it. Let's see what we get. Probably not the correct result right away, but I'll explain. So I enter my parameters again, and what do I see? In the second column, where the difference is supposed to be displayed, I see 0 all the way. So what's wrong with what I've done? At some point when I was creating my variables, you were probably saying, oh, what is he doing? He's subtracting fright from fright. Of course, he will end up having 0. However, here comes the actual trick. In Jasper reports, the order in which you declare the variables in the data set is very important, because the variables will be evaluated and incremented in this particular order when going through the data set from one record to the next. So the trick is to just move the old fright variable in front of the fright variable. So you see the old fright, which is pointing to fright variable, is calculated before the fright itself has been incremented. So the order in which these variables are declared is at the basis of our tip and trick for today. So let's save now the report and preview again. What do I see? Entering parameters again. Okay, so I indeed have a difference now. So 3.17 minus 0.33, it's 2 something. It seems correct. 217 minus 3 something, it's probably 240 something. So it seems correct. And furthermore, you can see that on the first record, since there is no previous record for the first record, the value of the difference cannot be evaluated. It's null. But if I don't want to see null here, of course I could replace the null with 0 or use blank here just by using either a flag. Let's use a flag at text field level saying when the value is null, let's just display blank. So the text field has a flag, blank when null. There we go. So if I hit preview now, I will not see null for the first record because difference on the first record doesn't make sense.
That's a nice trick. I have a question from the audience related to this one. He asks, so theoretically you could point to records -2, -3, -4 by creating additional variables. Is that true or false? So you
Yes,
might.
that's correct. So you see, basically, in order to go back one step in time, I need one variable, the one that I had to move in front of the current value, let's say. If I need to go back two steps behind, I could create an even older fright variable and put that one in front of this old one and make it reference the old. So with the further back I want to go in the data source, I just need to add one more variable in front of the other in terms of order of evaluation. So yes, I can go back as far as I want to.
Great, thank you for that. So was this, this is a side question, was this a feature that you realized after this was implemented, or was this thought up ahead of time?
I think I let's say discovered it. It's an afterthought but it's an old trick because even in the early days of JasperReports, this requirement came up quite immediately. So it's a long timer, let's say. So it worked like that from the beginning, but it was not, let's say, designed for. So it was a good outcome, let's say, of the way variables work and are incremented in JasperReports.
Great. I've got one more question about this one. Would this trick work with strings from the previous record?
Yes. Well, the type of variable, either it's number, date, or text, or even a custom bean or anything, is not important. It all boils down on what you want to do with that previous value and the type of formula you use those variables for. I mean, if you want to manipulate strings, you probably concatenate them or, I don't know, do some string manipulations with them. But again, this trick is not dependent on or is not related to the type of variable in any way. All variables, regardless of the type, benefit from this feature, let's say, or trick. The difference is only in what you can do with various types of objects.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that.
All right. So let me then move back to the slide and talk a bit about the second tip and trick of the day. So I just said, well, JasperReports is this library that is able to, Java library, that you can embed into any kind of Java application, and it is able to produce any document out of any kind of data because it has various ways to extend access to data by implementing custom data sources if those that we provide are not enough. And also, at the end of the chain, we can export our reports to various formats like PDF, HTML, Excel, Word, RTF, OpenOffice, and all that stuff. So we have a large variety of exporters that we support with JasperReports. And amongst the most popular are the ones that produce Excel documents and CSV. This is because Excel in general is still very popular today. People still like to use Excel to view their documents and their reports and further manipulate the data. However, this Excel exporters that we always had in JasperReports were created by trying to stay true to the goal of the JasperReports as a document generator, which was to make the documents look and feel the same across all the document formats that we support. So basically, when you export the report to PDF, you can be sure it will look exactly the same when you go to Word, or it will look exactly the same when you export to HTML. And this was actually true for Excel as well. So when we export a document to Excel, it looks very closely to how the PDF would like. We have this, what we call a pixel perfect quality of the documents that we produce. However, in Excel, sometimes this pixel perfectness is not desired because you want rather to further manipulate data by sorting, so you're not very concerned about the actual layout of the report. So this is why across all these years, with every release, we added more and more configurations to our Excel exporters in order to make them more data-centric. And an example I will show you right away, just to make to make a demonstration about these Excel exporters and how they work. So I'm going back again to iReport, and I will open I will open the same sample, but just not this one with the difference field that I made. So I open a fresh copy of this. Oh, a fresh copy. Yeah. Just a second. Just to get a fresh copy of this report from SVN. Fresh copy because it is already configured in a way that makes my demonstration more relevant, let's say. Okay, so I get a fresh copy of the sample from SVN. By the way, you have access to this SVN repository, so you can try these samples anytime you want. Maybe using iReport, why not? My machine is a bit slow. All right, so let's open this sample again. Okay. I will remove some images because otherwise they will not be found, so I just want to avoid some errors when previewing this report. And maybe remove a parameter as well, which is not important. All right. So if I preview here, he will ask me for those parameters, and by default in iReport, the default preview format is what we call the internal preview. So what we see here, it's an Adobe or Adobe Acrobat Reader-like viewer. You see, you can move from one page to another. We have 17 pages in this report, so it's a multi-page document, which is probably paper size A4. So you see, it's pixel perfect. It looks the same in PDF. If I want to see other formats, and let's say go to Excel, when I hit preview again, not only that he will display the preview in this internal viewer, but he will also launch Excel to display the report in Excel format, because setting that preview option to Excel, I triggered the Excel export. So here's Excel launching, and I see the Excel version of the same document. So what you see here is that I have the same page-oriented document. If I scroll down, you see the page header and page footer being rendered again. So it looks like all the 17 pages are all rendered one after the other on the same sheet in this Excel file. This is because by default, our Excel exporter tries to stay as close to PDF and internal preview as possible. But sometimes this is not desired because you see you end up with various little columns here which are just used for alignment because we had some gaps in the report template, so we need to preserve that white space and all that stuff. But because we try to keep the layout, preserve the layout, we lose in terms of ability to sort values using native sort features of Excel. So what to do then? Well, we tweak this export a lot. It's probably the most rich exporter in JasperReports in terms of configuration. We have configuration for suppressing repeating page headers and footers, for suppressing pagination in general. We have configuration for removing white space, for collapsing merged cells and all that stuff. Dozens and thousands of configurations. However, sometimes this is not enough because if the document was made out of different pieces, out of different pages, you cannot put it back together and make it look like a whole again. So we said, well, let's create different exporters for Excel and CSV. One, exporters that export pure data. So this is what we came up with. And these exporters no longer rely on layout to decide which cells to create in Excel. Rather, they rely on extra information inside the report template itself to make a sense of what data should be exported. So I'm just going back to my slide to review with you the way this exporters work. So I'm talking in particular about what we call the Excel metadata exporter. Why do we call it metadata exporter? Because unlike the layout-based one, this looks into the report template for certain metadata that helps him identify what columns need to be exported to Excel. And how does it do that? Well, it looks in the report template at different elements to see whether a property named Excel column name is there. If present, if this property is associated with a certain text field, it means that text field needs to be exported to Excel in its own column. The second wall, Excel right header, well, it tells the exporter that since columns have a name, maybe you want the first row in the Excel file to display the names of those columns. Sometimes some values may not be repeated with every record, such as the group header, as we'll see in our sample. So maybe you want to have this repeating value appear in all the records in Excel. So although it's suppressed when you view the PDF document, you want that value to be repeated over and over again in all records, so that you don't have missing data. By default, when certain text fields are marked up with these properties for the Excel metadata exporter, we export in Excel the exact value that text field displays. But sometimes this is not desired. Sometimes in PDF, let's say, you format a numeric value using a certain mask. However, when you go to Excel, you want to use a different mask or a different format pattern. So or using Excel, exporting Excel a totally different value. That's why you have a fourth property available, the Excel data property, in which you are free to write a different formula. And the value of this formula will be the one that will get to Excel export in the end. And then finally, there are certain report level properties that are not used in common use case scenarios. Basically, you could declare which columns to use if you have defined more columns than you need at a certain time. You can specify which of those available columns you want to export and things like that. So I will not get to that level of detail in my demo. So I'm going back to the sample and show you how the same report looks when we preview it or export it with what we call the Excel metadata exporter. So I switched the preview output format and I hit refresh. setting again the parameters for my report, and Excel will pop out displaying this new type of Excel export that we have. Sorry, just a moment. It was not picked. Hitting preview again. Something is wrong, but I don't know what. Oh. It didn't pick the preview option correctly. So let me preview again. All right. Something is wrong. I don't know what.
Well, Teodor, if you so what we do, we actually take a lot of the questions we get from the audience and a lot of the demo, and I actually type it up later and put it on the landing page for this tech talk. So we can follow up with the exact export option that they need to set to get it to work within iReport. So no worries if you can't get it to work live. We can keep going.
All right. Let me see.
I think the
okay. So yeah, it was some problem with the menu in iReport. So here comes the Excel metadata exporter output. You see there's pure data here. No more empty columns just for alignment. This is pure data. We have the country name repeating, although in the original document it's just a group header, so Argentina appears only once, but now I see it appearing in all my records. So of course with this kind of pure data export, I can certainly sort and filter and use all the Excel features that I want. Okay, so let me now, in the interest of time, well, just to say that these exporters are available everywhere JasperReports is embedded, including our server product, where the export channels are configurable. And we have documentation that explain how to add more export channels into our server product in the export menu. Okay, I'm going back to the slide and move to the last tip and trick of the day, which is, as I said in the beginning of the presentation today, it's one of the newest features in our products. What are data snapshots and what do we use them for? Well, it can happen that sometimes you have a report that has a very complicated query, like has many joins across many tables, and maybe it takes a long time to even retrieve the first few records of this query result set. So querying the database, it's expensive in terms of time and resources. So you might want to query that data once and then reuse the data returned by the query multiple times after, either by caching it or even persisting it. So it's the use of data snapshots is first of all an improvement in terms of performance, and it was a feature that we added to our products when we had to work on improving the interactivity of the reports. And I will show you some interactive reports that make use of data snapshots for fastest response to screen when interacting with the reports. Again, just to say that the fact that we cache the data allows us to even persist this data if people want to, although the persistence of data snapshots is something that is not turned on by default in our server product or inside our library when you embed it. The persisting of data snapshots, it's a configuration that you have to do manually in a way to acknowledge that you do want to persist, to allow data snapshots to be, or data in general, to be persisted inside your application, because Data persistence sometimes comes with security-related issues. So let me show you what these data snapshots are about. So I will bring up a browser window where I'm connecting to the latest version of our JasperReports server product. I'm connecting using the username and password. And I'm going to quickly create an interactive report, and I will show you where data snapshots are involved. Okay, so I'm connecting now. Sorry, it's a slow machine. I'm running the server locally. So I'm going to what we call the ad hoc designer, which allows me to quickly create reports in the web application without the need for me to be too technical, let's say, and have to use iReport. Unfortunately, this machine is pretty slow right now. Sorry about that. So I'm creating a table report starting from what we call a topic, which is basically an entry point in my database, which is basically a generic query that is bringing some fields from some tables I have in my database. And from the available fields in my query, I select some of them to use as columns in my table. Let's add one more. The shipping charge. It's pretty slow. Probably it's slow due to screen sharing as well. Sorry about that. Let's add country as a group to my table. And then let's save it. I give a name to my report and specify a place in the repository to save it to. And once this is done, I'm going to run this report that I just created. Here it is. So I click on it, and I should have my table right away in the report viewer. There we go. So it's a report with 31 pages, and it's interactive because I can select columns and resize them or format them by changing colors or header labels. Let's make this column display the values in some other color, in let's say some dark red. Okay, so I'm interacting with my report, but you see at the top of the report viewer it says I'm using data that was queried about a minute ago, because now it's 12:39, but this data is from 12:38. So it means that every time I'm interacting with my report and it gets re-rendered, using cache data. So behind this report, as I'm interacting with it, it's a data snapshot.
By the way, I'll stop you for a second. For those of you using the server product, so this was introduced in version 4.7. A lot of the conditional formatting that he was showing there was introduced in version 5, which was released just recently to the community. So this is all available in versions 4.7 and then some more in 5.0, just for those of you using older versions of the product.
Thank you, Ernesto. You saw I even sorted my my report by address. So I made various modifications to my report, and all this time the report viewer says I'm using data that was queried a few minutes ago. If I want to quit this report now, he will ask me whether I want to save my modification. And this is important because while I interacted with my report, I actually modified the report template itself. So I said, confirm, I give up because I actually want to save my report with these modifications. Now, what happens is that for the purpose of today's demonstration, I configured this server instance so that I have data snapshot persistent turned on, because as I said a few minutes ago, it's turned off by default in our product. But I changed the configuration, and this is documented how to do that. And for me, in this server, data persistence is turned on. So when I save the report, the data was saved as well with the report. So if I run it again now, I will see it will run using data from a few minutes ago, the data that was there in the report when I saved it. So the query of the report will not be executed. Let's see what it says. So it still says this is data from 12/38. However, if I want to see fresh data, I just have to hit the refresh data button, and then now it says this is data from 12/42. Well, there's no perceivable change on screen because there's no time-dependent information in this query, so it's not like I see fresher data. I see the same data. It's just that the timestamp of the data snapshot that I'm currently using was updated. Anyway, now that I refreshed the data snapshot, probably when I want to quit, he will ask me whether I want to save this new data snapshot again. And I say, well, you know what? I don't want to save, so let's quit without saving. And of course, when I will get back to my report, it will still contain the old 12/38 data that I had when I first saved it. Okay, so I think we're run out a bit of time, so I will just move back to the slides to see whether I had anything left. Just to say
yeah,
that
there's a few questions about where we were there, so I'll just stop you for a second if you don't mind. There's, I think, 3 questions related to this. The first one is, can you force the refresh report snapshot programmatically? And I believe the answer to that one would be yes, through the scheduler. When you schedule a report, you overwrite the one data snapshot that you keep. So it's important to know that there's only one data snapshot per report at the moment. Is that correct?
yes.
When I say that?
And actually,
okay.
Yes. Actually, this is an important use case scenario that we had in mind. We wanted our users to be able to use the scheduler to make fresh data snapshots on a regular basis, like at the beginning of the day or at the beginning of the week or whatever. And then during the day, everybody seeing that report would see a report that was already prepared for them, so they will not requery the database when viewing that report. And because pure data is stored separately inside the report itself, it enables us to still be able to interact with the report, unlike fully generated reports in which data is mixed with layout, like a PDF. You cannot interact with the PDF. So now that we have data snapshot support inside the report themselves, we can make what were basically static reports still make that interactive, provided that data is photographed beforehand. Anyway, before you go with more questions, just to explain what we have on this slide, we have the configurations that are available to turn on and off data snapshots. The first one, the recordable, it's critical to having or not having data snapshots. If you put that on false, data snapshot will not be there. And all the consequences like reports being slower and interactivity being slower, things like that. And the second one, it's the one that I specifically turned on in my server because by default it's false, and it allows me to actually persist the data snapshots that I'm making use of through the first property. And the last detail here, it's about how to make use of data snapshot functionality in applications embedding our library. Well, it's all about providing a report context object as parameter when you fill reports with JasperReports API, because data snapshots are, built up in this report context. And once you provide such a parameter to the JasperReports filling process, the data snapshots feature can take over. And that's all I had for the tips and tricks of the day. If you have more questions, okay. Ernesto?
Yeah, I have a couple for you, and I want to point out a few things. So these two properties here, you would set them, can you set them system-wide and report-wide, or per report, or is it only system-wide at this point?
They are both available at global configuration level and per report. So you can, let's say, turn off persistence globally, but then for certain reports still allow it. Like in sensitive, security-sensitive scenarios where you would not want data persistence to be available to people creating any report, because people might see data that they're not allowed to see. However, for certain reports, you would still want to turn that on, and you would do that on a per report basis, per report level basis. See what I mean? So
excellent.
The answer is yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There's a couple questions that are related. One of them is this feature only available for ad hoc reports? And somebody else asks, can I do this with iReport reports? The answer to that is yes. This is not only an ad hoc. So Teodor demonstrated the interactive viewer and the data snapshots. That actually works with a report created from any data source. So if you have a MongoDB type of report, or maybe, well, actually a great example would be Hadoop Hive. Hadoop Hive has high latency by default, and so no matter where the report is coming from or how you designed it, you can take advantage of data snapshots and also report interactivity.
Yes, and I would only add one thing to this, Ernesto. Not only that any report can benefit from data snapshots, but regardless of complexity, I mean, you could have reports that have sub-reports and sub-data sets, so the structure of the data is hierarchical, is very complicated, so we cache everything. I mean, we cache data as we iterate through it, and it's not related to the structure of the report or the kind of data sources they use. This is available for all.
Great. Another interesting one is where is this persistence happening? So is it on the disk? Is it on memory? Is it in a database? Do you want to take that one, Teodor? So this would be in the context of the server.
Yes, in the context of the server, because although data snapshots is available as a feature even when you embed JasperReports Library separately, when it comes to persistence, in an embedded environment, we don't know what means you have to persist anything, so it would be your responsibility to deal with that. However, in our server, we deal with persistence ourselves. So the persistence of data snapshots is done inside report unit resources. It's done like kind of a sub resource inside the report unit. It's basically a binary file because we serialize the data and we put it in a format that allows us to reread it and reload it exactly in the form that it was when we recorded it. So it's persistent inside our own repository where we keep all our resources like report templates, fonts, some report data sources, and all the metadata associated with a JasperReport server repository. Yeah. So it's a special kind of resource inside report units.
Okay, and I think like the object's loaded into memory, though it's not going to read it from disk every single time, maybe. So if it's stored in the database and I run the report, and then I interact with the report like you did, I'd imagine maybe it's just cached in memory temporarily?
Yes, it's cached in memory temporarily, yes. It's not read every time I need to rerun.
Okay, so another question, does data persistence also affect reports executed over the REST web services?
The answer is yes. I mean, with the with the REST web services, we are calling the same report running services that we use with the, let's say, normal report viewer. Or so the fact that we call through web service or through REST doesn't affect whether we use data snapshot or not. We use data snapshot just as it was configured for the normal report viewer as well. So it's not a different behavior through web services or REST.
Thank you very much. Before we move on, I think that was the last question about this this last topic. It seems to be an interesting one to folks listening because, well, one of the questions we're about to take is about, I have this query that takes forever. So this would be a great way to appear like results are coming back sooner than they are. There's a couple things to keep in mind here. First of all is data security. So if you have a parameter, something like logged in user or just something that, depending on the user that logs in, is going to get different data, you do not want to turn on data snapshots because we don't distinguish anything like that. It doesn't make much sense to do that. Now, maybe in the future, and maybe Teodor has plans or product management has plans to add that particular feature, but just know that if the SQL query runs for user A and it's in the where clause, it says where logged in user role is role admin, and then and that data snapshot is now preserved, and user B logs in and his role is not administrator, he is going to see the administrator data. So be careful with that. The second one to understand is when you have parameters in your report. So in Teodor's example, there weren't any parameters. Let's say I had a parameter that asked me for country, Argentina or France or Scotland. And the choice that I make is Argentina. And I save that snapshot. The data that's saved in that snapshot is only the values of Argentina, not the others. So when the others are chosen, the report is going to have to re-execute there. So it's not like we go and we execute every possible parameter, only the first one. I don't know if you have anything to add to that or if I said something wrong, Teodor, but I think...
No, you were right. And the data, just to put in a different way, the data snapshots we record and keep are always associated with the input parameter values that were used when the data snapshot was recorded. So any change in parameters will make the data snapshot, let's say, expire or force a requery because the keys would not correspond. However, just as you pointed earlier, saying there are security concern, it's when there are filters behind the scenes at lower level that are applied like a filter on top of data that we cannot get a hold on through parameters. Basically, a contextual information, like you said, the logged in user or something like that, that is not among the parameters that we have at hand when we record the data. So the filtering of data is produced somewhere down the stack where we don't know it's filtered. In those scenarios, that might be security concern, as you pointed out, and we recommend the persistence in that case not to be used. So, but if data is filtered through parameters that we know of when we record the data, then any change in parameters will trigger data snapshot expiration, so there's no problem with that. However, as you mentioned, there are certain deployments, certain data security infrastructure to which we don't have access to, so we wouldn't know whether behind the scenes filters and things like that happen, and we might, through persisting such sensitive data, we might have a security hole. So persistence of data snapshot to be taken seriously and considered wisely.
Yeah, and I think the admin guide has a little bit of a note about that, but just know it's a bit of a manual transmission. You turn it on, and then you could potentially burn out the engine. Okay, so there's a couple. I want to fly through a couple of questions, and then there's a really good one that I want to cover with a little bit more depth in the last few minutes that we have. First is there a JSON exporter? That's just a quick one. Do we have a JSON exporter?
No, not really. I mean, we could write one, but it's just that we would need to know what kind of JSON output is expected. Sometimes we get this question with regards to XML, and I think it's the same issue. The question is, do you guys have an XML exporter? And the answer is yes, we do have. It's just that the XML we produce is our own design XML. I mean, it's the XML we wanted to produce ourselves and was useful to us. But when it comes to Excel, the Excel expected by each individual is different from one to another. So we don't have an Excel exporter to export to an Excel format that you envision yourself or design yourself. I mean, you would need to write your own XML exporter that produces the XML you want. We wrote one for an XML format, that schema that we wanted. And same with JSON. I mean, we could write a JSON exporter that produces JSON in accordance to some JSON structure that we define. But our JSON structure might not be the one you want. So if you want a particular JSON export, you would probably end up writing your own specific JSON exporter. But writing exporters is not a big, it's not complicated. So just by following the exporters we have, you could create one yourself.
Is there a sample exporter that ships like in the samples folder to point somebody to writing their own exporter, or what would be like the easiest example to follow, just for somebody trying to, because that was the next question, was how do I write my own exporter?
Well, there's no sample showing a sample exporter, but all the exporters that we have could be used as starting points. I would recommend the XML exporter, the JRXML exporter class, which is among the source files of the library itself. So you would not find it as a separate sample, but you would certainly find all exporter implementations in the source code of the library itself. So for a starter, I would recommend the JRXML exporter because, well, first of all, it's probably the closest to a possible JSON exporter.
Okay, great. And this last question is a really interesting one. So this report developer has a crosstab created in iReport. So it's not aggregating the data in the data source, but it's actually letting the JR engine do the aggregation. And then they want to make this interactive, so when you click on an intersection of, let's say, year and country, you get to see the detail rows. Now, the query takes a long time to execute, so they don't want to do the typical thing you do in a drill-through report where you pass a parameter to the query. They actually want to pass the entire value of that row into another report. So what I was thinking, and this is where I'll get your help, Teodor, I was thinking if there's a way to pass maybe an entire row as a collection and then use a JR collection data source in the detail level report to just simply display what that row would have. Does that make sense?
Well, it's the important thing here is this kind of interactivity, the ability to click on a cell value and display something else. Is this kind of interactivity built into the application that, and are we talking about an application that embeds Jasper Reports? Are we talking about our Jasper Reports server? Because it's important who's offering this kind of interactivity. I mean, let's say we want to
let's assume it's the server for this example. I believe
the server. For the server, I don't think it's possible. You see, because we don't have in server this ability to work with in-memory collection of object as data source for some report units. See. I was actually hoping the person is talking about an application that embeds Jasper Reports, because if you embed Jasper Reports, you're responsible for providing the data to the reports you're running and capturing the output of the library to display to the end user. So if you're responsible for providing the data, then it is you in your application who chain the reports like that. So the logic involved when chaining that on click on the cell and all that stuff, it's part of your application business logic. So yeah, if you have that collection of objects that represents the row in memory, on that click, the event you trigger, you probably have ways to point to the right in-memory object collection and provide it to a second report that runs against that collection of objects. So the answer would be yes, this is possible if you embed Jasper Reports in a kind of application that you develop yourself. In our server, it's not that easy because we don't have, ways to allow you to run against in-memory data source objects and things like that. But what I can tell you is that we are working on, for future releasing, we're working on adding interactivity to cross that. So maybe this kind of interactivity will come for free in future versions of Jasper Reports and Jasper Reports Server when our crosstab will be interactive by nature, let's say. So that's
yeah, and the only other thing I was thinking is that you are allowed to pass a collection through URL. So you might just have, maybe it's just 10 parameters that you pass over from one report to another. So you might be able to work around it if your data is simple and not very much of it, to just somehow store those in variables. But yeah, not a complete answer, I guess. Okay, so don't have time for any more questions. There are a few more. I will. So the link, the main Tech Talks page, by later today will have all the questions and the answers that we have heard today. So before we sign off, we've gone a little bit over time. Just want to announce the 2 next shows are going to be January 8th. We have how to do business intelligence on big data. So Matt Dahlman will join us. Now this one will come at 10 a.m. Pacific time, so you probably in the European time zones you'll watch it recorded afterwards, but he'll do some demos on MongoDB and Google BigQuery and a few others. For those of you not not necessarily doing big data stuff, it'll still be interesting to you because he does some interesting stuff with Jasper Reports, some tricks around there. And then Tuesday, January 15th, we are going to meet the Jaspersoft Studio developers. So we're going to have, I believe, 4 developers on the show. Each of them is going to show their favorite feature of Jaspersoft Studio. So tune in January 15th, 2013 at 10 a.m. like today. Teodor, thank you very, very much for your presentation. I've actually gotten some of the questions were just comments saying this is fantastic. One of the guys here in the audience in Dublin said he's actually going to go right back to his desk and use the previous record value for a report that he's developing today. So seems like people got a lot of good stuff out of this.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and see you all next time.
Great. Thanks, Teodor. Happy holidays, everybody. Signing off now.